This week, Britain's flagship aircraft carrier broke down in a Norwegian fjord on its way to America. A mission to project power interrupted by another mechanical failure. Just weeks after Trump mocked Britain's aircraft carriers as toys, the Royal Navy's flagship is back in port for emergency repairs. The Royal Navy pushed back hard when Trump said it. The ship is still in Stavanger. Trump called them toys. The timing of the latest breakdown could not have been worse for the Royal Navy. HMS Prince of Wales, the Royal Navy's flagship aircraft carrier, is currently docked in Norway's Stavanger, undergoing repairs after suffering a technical fault during NATO's dynamic Mongoose anti-submarine warfare exercise in late May. The ship had been en route to the United States to participate in celebrations marking 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The Ministry of Defence confirmed only that the carrier was conducting a port visit to Stavanger and expected to set sail within days. A senior naval source did not hold back in describing the effect on those aboard.
With morale already at rock bottom over defense spending and delays over the defense investment plan, the last thing the Royal Navy needed was HMS Prince of Wales marooned in a Norwegian fjord.
It provided no details on the nature of the fault. Sources cited by the Daily Mail identified it as a propeller shaft issue, a problem that has plagued both of Britain's Elizabeth-class carriers repeatedly since they entered service. The breakdown comes weeks after Trump publicly mocked British carriers at a press event, dismissing them while criticising the UK for not joining US and Israeli strikes against Iran during Operation Epic Fury.
The UK say that we'll send, this is 3 weeks ago, we'll send our aircraft carriers, which aren't the best aircraft carriers, by the way. They're toys compared to what we have. But we'll send our aircraft carrier when the war is over. I said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Don't bother. We don't need it. And we don't need it. We don't need them.
Royal Navy veterans and serving officials pushed back sharply at the time. The latest breakdown has done their cause no favours. The HMS Prince of Wales has a troubled maintenance record. It suffered a catastrophic propeller shaft failure in August 2022 that left it stranded near the Isle of Wight and required towing to Scotland for months of repairs. Maintaining and repairing both Elizabeth-class carriers has already cost more than £1 billion. The breakdown arrives as the UK government is overdue in publishing its defence investment plan amid a funding dispute between the Ministry of Defence and the Treasury. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has spoken of the need for Britain to be ready and to deter. A flagship carrier stuck in a Norwegian port for the second time in 4 years with the same class of fault is not the image of readiness his government was hoping to project. Your time is up. That's the warning from Vladimir Putin's most vocal ally. A threat to sink British warships, a direct message to the United Kingdom. As Russia's rhetoric escalates, one question looms large. Is this just propaganda, or a signal of something far more dangerous? Russian state rhetoric has taken a sharply escalatory turn, with one of Vladimir Putin's most prominent propagandists openly calling for direct attacks on the United Kingdom, raising fresh concerns about how far Moscow's messaging is willing to go. According to a report by the Daily Mirror, a leading Kremlin-aligned television host issued a stark warning, suggesting that Britain could be targeted and even sunk amid rising tensions with the West. The comments come at a time when relations between Moscow and NATO countries remain deeply strained, particularly over continued Western support for Ukraine. In the broadcast, Vladimir Solovyov, Putin's most vocal ally, delivered a chilling message, invoking the possibility of military retaliation against the UK.
Russia must take responsibility for combating piracy, and so will be forced to sink British Royal Navy ships involved in piracy and the hijacking of commercial vessels.
Sarcastically, Solovyov alluded to the Royal Navy's shrunken presence in the world's seaways, referring to a destroyer now patrolling off Cyprus and one of 2 aircraft carriers.
I wonder, after we sink the first 2 British ships, how many will they have left? First the Dragon, then the Prince of Wales, and that's it. That's the point. Not many, right? So Britain doesn't rule the seas anymore. Relax, your time is up.
This is not the first time Russian state media has used such rhetoric. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, pro-Kremlin voices have frequently escalated their language, including references to nuclear capabilities and threats against European capitals. The Kremlin has repeatedly claimed that the West is seeking to weaken or even dismantle Russia. Vladimir Putin himself has previously stated that Western powers aim to weaken, divide, and destroy the country. The UK, one of Ukraine's strongest backers, has been a frequent target of Russian criticism. British military aid, intelligence support, and diplomatic pressure on Moscow have made it a focal point in Russian narratives about Western involvement. Despite the rhetoric, Western governments have sought to avoid direct military confrontation with Russia, emphasizing that their support for Ukraine is defensive in nature. However, the language emerging from Russian media underscores the fragile and volatile nature of the current geopolitical moment. As the war continues, the gap between rhetoric and reality remains a critical concern. But with threats becoming more explicit and more frequent, the risk of miscalculation is something neither side can afford to ignore. Britain's naval strength has come under renewed scrutiny amid claims that the Royal Navy is struggling to meet operational demands at a critical moment. Questions are now being raised about the country's ability to lead key NATO missions, following a series of developments that have exposed gaps in frontline readiness. The controversy centres on the deployment of HMS Dragon, which had originally been scheduled to lead a NATO mission in the North Atlantic. However, after an Iranian drone strike hit RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus on March 1st, the Type 45 destroyer was redirected to the eastern Mediterranean. In its place, the German frigate FGS Sachsen will now take command of NATO's Standing Maritime Group 1. The move has prompted criticism from within the UK, with Conservative MP Ben Obese-Jekti told the Portsmouth News that
the Royal Navy had officially run out of ships. Britannia most certainly doesn't rule the waves.
the situation has been further complicated by remarks from Defence Secretary John Healey, who stated during an interview that Britain operates 17 frigates and destroyers. In reality, the figure stands at 13, including 6 Type 45 destroyers, of which only 1 is currently deployed at sea. Although a senior Royal Navy officer is expected to retain command of the NATO task group, operations will now be conducted from the German flagship. The German embassy confirmed the shift on X, describing it as part of an increased military presence in the North Atlantic.
Germany is increasing its military presence in the North Atlantic under NATO. As the UK deploys HMS Dragon to the eastern Mediterranean, German frigate Sachsen will take over from HMS Dragon as NATO Maritime Task Group flagship, an expression of the close partnership.
The Ministry of Defence has defended the arrangement, insisting that the UK's commitment to NATO remains unchanged. A spokesperson said it is not unusual for such groups to be commanded from an Allied warship while still being led by British personnel. Nonetheless, the inability to provide an alternative vessel has intensified concerns about the Royal Navy's stretched resources. HMS Dragon itself required urgent preparation before deployment, having been in dry dock and undergoing maintenance when the drone strike occurred. The vessel reportedly lacked missiles and was surrounded by scaffolding at the time it was ordered into action. Families gathered in Portsmouth as the warship eventually set sail on March 10th. However, it took a week for the vessel to reach operational readiness, followed by several days to exit British waters and transit through Gibraltar and the Mediterranean before arriving in Cyprus. The delay has drawn criticism, particularly after the Ministry of Defence had previously indicated that the ship was operational, a status suggesting it could be deployed within 72 hours. In reality, HMS Dragon sailed a week after being ordered to do so, and 10 days after the initial strike on RAF Akrotiri. At the time, reports indicated that 5 of the Royal Navy's 6 Type 45 destroyers were undergoing repairs while the Cypriot base came under attack. The sluggish response has fueled debate over Britain's preparedness to respond swiftly to emerging threats. Former Royal Navy Commander Rear Admiral Parry told The Sun that the situation was a farce, criticising the government for failing to anticipate rising tensions in the region. He also questioned the strategic planning behind the UK's current defence posture. Despite these concerns, HMS Dragon, one of the most advanced warships in the Royal Navy, is now entering the Middle East theatre. Yet the episode has cast a spotlight on the broader challenges facing Britain's naval capabilities.